So we have today a pretty high yield event, if we do say so ourselves, become a top MCAT scorer with Anki. And let me see, let me move the presentation forward. All right, so these are our panelists. So I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves. So I'll go first. My name's Noah. I'm a second year at Mayo Clinic, and I'm happy to be here tonight. I've mostly used Anki in med school, but as you'll learn tonight, it's very helpful for preparing for your MCAT.
I can go next. My name is Anika. I'm a first year at Mayo, and also like Noah, I've mostly used Anki in med school, but I did use it a little bit for my MCAT. And I'm excited to be here with you all.
My name is Raleigh. I'm a first year at Baylor. I used Anki throughout the MCAT and still use Anki. And we're just so excited that everybody joined. This is really going to be a great event. And I really think this is the one thing that I wish everybody knew when they were starting the MCAT is how to use Anki. So hopefully this will be helpful for everyone.
All right, perfect. So before we officially get started, we just have a couple of brief announcements as always. So at the conclusion of this event at 7:15, and that's Eastern time, you can join for study with us, and we all have work to do. And if you want to stick around afterwards, then you can get some work done. Early in the new year in 2024, we're going to have an underrepresented in medicine and non-traditional panel, and they'll give insights into the unique struggles and pathway that some of those students face. And then our founder, JR, he came out with a new course recently. You might have seen it promoted. And it's a 30-day course where students receive daily videos on evidence-based strategies for becoming great students. I know JR put a lot of work into it. So if you would like to do that, you can sign up for that. And now we'll officially get started. So this is sort of the agenda for tonight. So Anika is going to go first, and she's going to talk about settings and how to get started, where to find decks. Then Raleigh is going to go through an example workflow. And I'll talk a little bit about the different versions of Anki, some basic tips and advice, and big picture and resources. And then we're all available for Q&A. You can stop us at any point if you have questions, and we'll be more than happy to answer those. So yeah, and then with that, I'll let you take it away.
Okay, perfect. So for those of y'all who haven't used Anki before, brief background, it's essentially a way of retaining knowledge over time. So in a way, spaced repetition. I don't know if any of you have heard of that term or read about it. Basically, Anki is an algorithm that feeds you flashcards based on what you're learning, based on how well you're learning it, and it helps you retain that information over time. And so you, for example, will rate a question if you get it right, like good, easy, hard. There's various difficulties you can scale it at. And then based on that feedback, Anki will give it back to you at a certain time interval later. And so that's how it kind of optimizes your ability to retain information over time. So with that being said, first step obviously is to download Anki. Noah, Raleigh, do you know if we send these slides out later to the students?
Yeah, I'll be sure to do that. I just realized that since we have a bunch of useful information, we'll definitely send it to the students.
Yeah, so you guys will get a copy of this, and I think we've linked resources throughout the PowerPoint, which will be great. So the link here is just how you would get to download Anki. And then, so there's these things called decks. Decks are basically just a way of organizing your flashcards. So when it comes to the MCAT, a lot of people end up downloading their decks from Reddit. There's a lot of really comprehensive, great resources already out there that are free. So I'll talk a little bit about that later. In addition to that, you can also create your own decks. So sometimes maybe there's information that you thought would be useful for you to know, or something that's specific to you that wasn't in the deck. So you can always create your own flashcards and organize those separately or add them to existing decks. In terms of your settings, there's a lot of things that you can toggle with. I am by no means an Anki master like some folks, but I think these are the few things that you might want to know. So Noah, if you go to the next slide, I can talk a little bit more about each of them. Okay, so just breaking it down. So in terms of new cards per day, that's exactly what it sounds like. You can set a limit for how many new cards will be queued up every day. So say, so I'm going to use the new terminology. I'm going to try my best to explain when I use new terminology, but you can suspend cards. So if you don't want to see it, you can suspend it, which means that it's kind of like on ice. And then when you want to bring it back again, you can unsuspend it. So say you unsuspend 1,000 cards. If you set your limit, like I've set mine, for example, to 250, you're not going to see 1,000 cards in one day. You'd see 250 at most, and you'd see less than that if you unsuspend fewer than that. So that's just a way of kind of managing your day-to-day workflow. Like, and that varies from person to person. You don't have to set it as high, you can set it lower, whatever you feel like is manageable for you. And then the next setting for daily limits is maximum reviews per day. So I just set mine to the max because reviews are basically when a card comes back to you. So if you want the algorithm to do its job and try and feed you them at the right intervals, it helps to have it set as high as possible just so it doesn't change back and forth. I think there was something on the previous slide, actually. Okay, yeah. And then just briefly explaining new cards. So basically your learning steps are what I mentioned earlier, the intervals between when you do your Anki cards and then when they come back to you as reviews. So when you first see a card, I'm trying to remember what the settings specifically say. It's like easy, good, hard, or difficult, or something like that. And so when they come back to you, when you get a card, you choose one of those as your option to move forward. And so if you think a card is easy, it'll come back to you in 8 days, which is what I've set as my easy interval here. If you see a card for the first time and it comes and you think it's hard, it'll come back in 15 minutes, for example. So those are just different intervals based on the level of difficulty that you rate cards. And basically these steps you can toggle with. I personally haven't messed around much with mine, but again, we will also offer resources for those of you who want to get more into the weeds of how you can set that up to be custom to you. But overall, it's already pretty much optimized for the basics, I think. Also, Raleigh and Noah, feel free to jump in if there's anything you want to add to any of these slides as well. Okay.
These are great settings. These are great settings for anybody who wants to start off. I would go with these settings.
Okay, we can go to the next slide. Perfect. So then lapses are when you're relearning things. So say you've had a card for a while, you felt good about it, and then it comes back and you've kind of forgotten about it, so you might miss the card. These are just the settings that you set for how frequently you'd like to see it again, given that you did know it at one point, but you might want to relearn it again. So I left them as pretty similar to when I'm learning a card for the first time, just because if I've forgotten it, it probably means I need to do a little bit of work on it, but you can always change that as well. And for bearing, the only thing that I think was important for me, at least, is sometimes you'll have cards that are tied together. Like say, it's like a card that has like 3 blanks, and each new card related to that card will have a different blank, like left blank. And so in terms of when you see them, sometimes if you've already seen that kind of card today, you don't want to see it again just because you already know the answer because you've read the rest of the sentence before. So I just click bury new siblings because that way it'll present the card to me at a later time. But again, that's like a very small detail, and you can get way more into the weeds with this, but I feel like these are the good settings that I've been using for a while and have been working for me. So, okay. And again, feel free to put questions in the chat if anything I said was unclear or something that I need to clarify. But in terms of where to find decks, so like I mentioned earlier, Reddit has so many. These are a very small sampling of all the options that are out there. I try to choose the ones that I've heard people use the most or ones that I've personally used. And I've just kind of gone and organized them by like the amount of cards they have, any other important content information that you'd have to know for these. And so I'll start with Miles Down. This is the one that I'm a little biased. This is the one that I used when I was studying for the MCAT. It's pretty popular. The same user who created the deck actually has 90-page review sheets, which are really nice. So if you want everything that's in the Kaplan books synthesized into like summary sheets, if that's how you like studying, these cards actually align based on those sheets. So it's really nice for that as well. Then Ortho 528, On King and Jack Sparrow are all more longer cards. So they just have like almost double the amount of cards that Miles Down does. But that being said, they are a lot more comprehensive. They try and go way more into detail than just summary sheets. So if that's something you're interested in, those are probably the decks that I would recommend. If you want some of Miles Down sheets in there as well, On King actually combines Miles Down with other decks, and they also organize by Khan Academy. So a lot of these resources, a lot of the Anki decks are actually integrated with other resources. So if you're using something else and you'd like something to supplement that, I feel like that's also a great way to choose a deck. But overall, like, again, these are just 5 of many, many options. I think you shouldn't stress too much over choosing quote unquote the best deck. I see that a lot on the internet where like, which is the best deck to study with? I think there's a lot of options, but I think the one that you're going to stick with is probably the best for you. If you feel like you really need to rely on like Anki for repetition, you really want to get all your content done through that, pick a more comprehensive deck, stick with that. If, for example, I chose to only really use Anki for Psych and Soc, so if you wanted a smaller deck, there's also decks that offer that as well. And again, you don't have to unsuspend every card, so nobody's saying you don't have to do on King 5,311 cards. You could also do fewer than that and just use it to supplement your learning. All right, I'll pass it on to Raleigh.
Awesome. That was a really great explanation. And if you have any questions about settings or anything, we also have an MCAT thread within our Slack, and you can always ask questions there or ask about specific decks. But now I'm going to go through kind of how we use Anki. You know, you've probably heard of people using Anki for the MCAT. I just want to show and demonstrate how we use it. There's kind of 4 steps. The first step sounds funny, but it's to learn the material. So many students will just use Anki without maybe actually understanding the material or watching a video or reading a textbook about it. And that isn't necessarily what Anki is best suited for. Anki is great to help you remember information that you already understand. These next 3 steps, finding cards, unsuspending cards, and setting the cards every day, are what I'm going to show you. So if it's okay, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can everybody see the screen? Yes? Awesome. Okay, so let's imagine that we're studying for Psych Soc, and Khan Academy is one of my favorite resources because it's free. So let's say I just watched this video on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my Anki. Everybody can see this as well, right? This Anki deck, hopefully. Sorry, the screen sharing is not letting me move Anki right now. Let me see if we can do something here. Okay. Whew. Okay, so the first thing that we need to make sure we have is actually a downloaded deck. I downloaded for this example the Anki MCAT deck. So I just learned about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now I'm going to go into this browse feature right here. And in the browse feature, you're going to see, it kind of looks scary, but that's okay. You're going to see 2 bars. And this is where I would start off. If you're just learning Anki, this is probably the easiest workflow. So there's this left bar, which will help you look up specific card decks about videos or specific videos that you've watched. And then this right bar is going to be more for general terms. So the first step I would do is to start with this left side, and I would type in, let's say, Maslow. And in this case, Maslow doesn't show up on the left side deck, meaning for some reason there isn't a perfect deck of cards about that Khan Academy video, but that's okay. I'm going to type here then in the central bar. Remember, the central bar is more general. I'm going to type in Maslow. And I see 6 cards, and you can notice they're all in highlighted yellow. The next thing right here is to go through the cards, and you can edit them or decide if you want to use them. So let's say I look at this card and I'm like, oh yeah, I just watched that in this video. What I can do is I can click on the card. You can press Command or Control J, and you'll see how it changes from yellow to, it'll either be black or white if you have the light mode on. Another way to do that is you can go up to cards, or you can go to cards and you can press toggle suspend. or unsuspend. So what this means is I've unsuspended this card, and if I come back here, that card is now going to appear in my deck to study, or in my like list of cards that I need to study for that day. So it's going to show up as a blank, and I'm like, oh yeah, I just remember this. And then it's going to give me options down here. So I can say, oh, again, because I totally didn't remember this, I can say that was kind of hard. Maybe I want to remember it again in 10 hours from now, or 12 hours. Let's say it was good. I felt good with it, which is what most people would click, would be either good or again. I'll see it tomorrow. And then if it's easy, then I'll see it 6 days from now. And that will build on each other. So I'll click good for that, and then I'm done with my cards for now. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. This webinar will be recorded, so you can watch these over and over again. But once again, you want to watch the videos or whatever you're learning from, and then you want to go into Anki, you want to find your cards, unsuspend the cards, and then study your cards. Hopefully that helps.
Perfect. Does anybody have any questions about that? Because I know that was a little confusing for me when I was just getting started with Anki. I'm like, wait, you telling me to go watch these videos? Where do I find the videos? And okay, how do I sort by tags and all this stuff? So it can be a little daunting if you're just getting started. Alrighty. Well, if not, then I'll move on to my portion. Let me share my screen again. That was everything. That's horrible. Okay. So.
Oh, it looks like we actually do have a question. Someone asked, how do you pace yourself?
Yeah, Raleigh, maybe do you want to take a stab at that?
That's a good question. I'm guessing it's referring to like how do we pace ourselves with the amount of studying we're doing or the amount of cards we're doing. Hopefully that's what you're asking. But I think the answer there is that Anki will pace it for you. The settings that you've decided will basically decide for you how many questions you're going to be seeing, how many cards you'll be seeing. I don't know if that answers that question. Maybe Noah or Anika, you guys understood that question differently than I did, or have a better answer.
Oh, I see. I think they clarified saying with the answering cards, for example, 10 seconds per card.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah. Okay, this is actually a good question. So I would say so 10 seconds for a lot of people is actually kind of slow-ish or maybe reasonable. What is too fast, and I see people doing this all the time, like I'll be in my med school lectures and I'll just see people like click, 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 like 2 seconds a card. You're not retaining anything. Maybe you're having some pattern recognitions of where the word is on the screen, but I would say probably anywhere between 5 to 10 seconds a card is reasonable. Anything below 5 seconds, and I promise you're not learning.
I concur.
All right, so now I'll talk a little bit about Anki, which is one of the more popular decks. Certainly it is for medical students, but there's also an Anki version for the MCAT. Raleigh showed you that. So there's actually 2 versions. So there's version 11, and then there's also version 12. So the main thing about version 11, that's completely free. Another perk of it is that the deck is your own, so you can edit and remove cards as you please. If you don't like a certain card or how it's phrased, you can edit it. If you think it's completely trash, you can just remove it from the deck and you never have to ever see it again. People have been using version 11 for years at this point, and it's been very well validated. And this is just a personal gripe, but you don't also have to constantly log in Anki Hub, which is just kind of annoying. The downside to version 11 is that it'll probably over the years, it'll probably gradually lose some support as V12 is now the official current version. And the creator will probably start to put more effort into V12 as opposed to V11. In fact, I don't think V11 is getting content updates anymore. V12, so this one is actually kind of unique. So it's updated weekly to keep information as current as possible. Which is if you like the latest and greatest, V12 is the one for you. You get access to Anki Hub community, and basically it's like a web forum. You can ask questions, you can talk with other pre-meds, discuss things, and then the software will continue to be maintained and updated. The downside to V12 is that it's paid. Fortunately, it's not that much. You can do $5 a month, and if you want to trial Anki and see if this is something for you, you can just be like, hey, I'm gonna pay $5 for the next couple of months, see if this works out for me. If not, then no big deal. Or if you know that you're going to be an Anki nut, then you can just pay $240 for lifetime access. The only thing I would say about V12 is that you might not need constant updates like medical students do. Medical students, where the guidelines for pneumonia, say, are changing constantly, or screening tests. For the MCAT, it's asking you about basic physics, which hasn't changed in 1,000 years. So there's not a lot to be updated except for maybe wording or slight variations on topics. But for the most part, your biochemistry, genetics, and all that, that's not going to change a whole lot for you. So now this is probably what I think is probably the most important slide, other than the settings. Like the settings are incredibly important, and then the workflow is also important. All of it's important, but for basic tips, I would just say make sure to keep up with your cards. Backlogs really do suck. I've like skipped 5 days and now you have like 1,000 cards, and it's just awful. It's not fun. Nobody wants to sit around for 4 or 5 hours and do a bunch of cards. No big deal if you missed a day or two, but Anki really works best if you make it a habit. If you're feeling overwhelmed by the amount of cards, you can always suspend the cards that you know really well and keep the ones that you always seem to forget. It's a memory tool. At the end of the day, if you know something, then you don't need to be constantly reminded of how well you know it. Remember that Anki is a tool for retention. Raleigh mentioned it earlier. It's not a primary source of learning. Do not unsuspend 200 cards and just brute force it. It's not an effective way to learn. It's frustrating. It's not fun. Do either read the textbook, watch the videos, do practice questions, something else that is a more active form of learning, because Anki is really more passive. You're just clicking cards. You're not really having to do a lot of thinking. It's more so to get those facts that require a lot of repetition. One other part is that add-ons. So and I actually might show you this, but add-ons are actually super helpful. And basically what they allow you to do is that they add, like their name suggests, they add on things to Anki's basic intrinsic functionality. So one of my upper year students actually helped me find these. So like Advanced Browser and Better Search are basically add-ons that make searching things a little bit easier and a little bit less clunky than it was in the original release. The review heat map is pretty cool, and I can actually show you what mine looks like. You'll see how I took a bunch of gaps, which isn't good because I'm the one giving you advice to not take gaps. But basically, it shows you your progress over time. And it's kind of satisfying because the more cards that you do, the darker a little square will get. But it can be a nice like motivation to see that you've done Anki every day. Image occlusion enhanced is actually really helpful if you make your own cards. That's really helpful for, say, like anatomy or something like that, or things where you need to know certain structures or things that are pictorially represented. And then delay overdue is basically what that is. If you have a bunch of cards that are due and it's just way too much, like you skip 5 days, you can delay those cards. Be careful about this one though. because you'll quickly get behind on your studying, and then it'll be a while before you see those cards again. So say you skip 15 days or 2 weeks of cards and you delay overdue, you won't see any of those cards for 15 days. So you basically set yourself back an additional 2 weeks. So if it's really too much, you can always use that as an option. But maybe I'll stop my share and I'll see if I can bring up my own version of Anki and show you what this looks like. So here's my Anki. This is what my review heat map looks like. You can see I was like really good for the longest time, and then I was bad, but now I'm like back on it. But this is basically what the review heat map looks like. Darker squares, like I said, you have more cards. So this day I did 767, lighter blue I did 42.
So Noah, can I make a comment here that I think is great?
Yeah, for sure.
I think one thing that's great, by the way, nice job with your studies, is just to see that Noah studied 180 cards in 33 minutes. And I just want to say that that can show you that, wow, if you think to yourself, oh, I have so many cards, or how am I going to get through all these cards? You can really get through a lot of cards in just a half an hour, and that can be a great review for everything you're studying. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that 100 cards might seem like a lot, but it really doesn't take that much time.
Yeah, that is really nice. That's a great point. Like, I would say like 100 or 200 cards is really reasonable. If you're doing 200 or 300 cards a day, it's maybe at most 40 minutes of your day. Where it starts getting more difficult is like in the lead up to the MCAT, or for us, for step one. JR has talked about it. Sometimes you're doing like 500 or 600 cards a day, and that it gets a little grindy. But let me show you where add-ons are. So if you go to if you go to tools and then you go to add-ons, you'll have this, you can see all the add-ons that I currently have on my Anki. If you want to get more, you just go to click get add-ons, and then those codes that I put in the PowerPoint that we're going to send out for you guys, you just copy and paste those codes, and they should be updated. I just went through them the day before, and you'll be able to have them. There are some other cool add-ons I didn't mention, like there's a Call of Duty kill streaks one. If you're the person who needs positive reinforcement, if you do like 5 cards in a row, it'll be, or 3 cards in a row, it'll be like triple kill, or like 4 words quad. And like, so that's like kind of, if you need some reinforcement, you can make it like a game. But yeah, so that's what I would say. That's really helpful. Let me go back to the PowerPoint. And then we can all chime in here, but I'll just kind of go through what I wrote on here. Anki is one of many resources that you can use to succeed. Remember that it's a powerful tool if used correctly. That being said, don't feel bad if you slack or that you find out that it's really not your jam. I have some good YouTube videos that I have listed at the bottom here. The first one is a good overview of version 12. It's Anki. He's the person who made a lot of this possible. The second video is just overall good settings for the free version of Anki for people who don't want to pay $5 a month for that $240 lifetime fee. The third video, he's a learning expert, self-proclaimed learning expert, and he does a good overview of the pros and cons of flashcards and the theory behind spaced repetition. And the fourth video is by none other than JR, who is an Anki aficionado. So he goes through how he's used it in his workflow and how he's become more efficient with Anki. And then I'll let Anika and Raleigh share anything that they want for big picture resources that I didn't mention.
Actually, I'll just shout out the same one that you did. So the second link on here, good settings for V11, is how I learned how to really use Anki. So just also verified. And
then I'll just add a plug here that you can always ask us questions on the Slack MCAT thread. We have time, and not many people ask a lot of questions on that thread, but we are there ready to help. And Anki is something, it's a skill. It's kind of like a sport that, you know, you're not going to learn all right in one moment. And so you're going to have a lot more questions over time as you learn it. And we are there to help. So please ask any questions you have about Anki on the Slack, and between the three of us, I think we'll be able to respond pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's a great point. Make use of the MCAT thread on the on the Teach As You Learn workspace. And then here's a QR code. Maybe I can find a link, but this is a QR code for feedback if you have, to let us know how we did, or anything that you wish that we covered that we didn't, or things that we glossed over. But that being said, that is our official presentation, but we're gonna stick around for questions. And if nobody has any questions live, I can go through a list of recent questions that JR and Madison sent us. So you can either, oh wait, it's a panelist, so I guess they can't unmute themselves, but ask it in the Q&A, or I'll just go through a list of pre-listed questions.
And feel free to ask them. I think we have like 10 minutes still just to ask questions. So feel free to ask your questions and we'll take the time to answer them. And we'll probably just answer them out loud for everyone to hear.
Yeah, it looks like someone asked, how do you incorporate sketchy Pixarize into Anki? What is the best way to study them? Can you demonstrate live with a card? So are either of you aware if there's MCAT resources through Sketchy or Pixarize?
I don't know if there are for MCAT. I believe maybe there's some Pixarize. I never used it for the MCAT.
Yeah, I also was not familiar, but in terms of Pixarize in general, there's decks like Anki incorporates, we can show them this too, but Sketchy and Pixarize are third-party resources for those of you who don't know. You can integrate those into, oh, Sketchy is for the MCAT, fairly new. Okay. Well, that's awesome that they're doing that. I'm a fan of Pixarize. I haven't tried Sketchy yet, but basically these are third-party resources. So kind of like Khan Academy, they make videos or content that you can use to study and retain information. For example, Pixarize does like a mind palace. So if you've never heard of that, it's like a memory tactic to basically associate terminology that you need to memorize with like visual images and a scene essentially. So it really literally paints a picture for you, which is pretty cool. So in terms of how to incorporate that into Anki, Anki I know has tags that you can search that are organized by Pixarize cards or Sketchy cards, and those actually include the scene as well from the video. So that's really helpful for retaining that information. Do either of you, I can also pull it up, but we can demonstrate live with a card.
I've got it pulled up. I can do it real fast. Okay, I'll just do a quick demo, not with Sketchy for the MCAT, but just for Sketchy for med school, if that's okay. So let's go here. Can everybody see my screen, hopefully? Okay. So let's say I watched a video and let's say it was about heparin. What you're gonna do is we're gonna do that same process. So you click on browse, then you go on this left-hand side, because this is the one we're gonna look at first to find which video it's in. So I'm gonna type in heparin. And we find here that heparin is in a lot of different things, a lot of different videos, but we're looking for the one from Sketchy. So I'm gonna go right over here. This is in my deck. Your deck would be for the MCAT, but this is for med school. And I'm going to find where it says Sketchy. So this is physio, we don't want that. This is Pixarize, we don't want that, although you could find the one about heparin from Pixarize. And then finally, we're gonna find Sketchy Farm. And this video says heparin, low molecular weight heparin. Let's see if it corresponds with the video, and it does. So then I click on that video, and this will show me all of the cards. that correspond with that video. And it'll even, if you scroll down, you can see these cards, the little snippets of each part of the memory palace below. And that's really, really helpful. Sometimes I even like taking this card and putting it in the extra so that it immediately appears when I press on the space bar or when I reveal the card. So that's how you use Sketchy, or Pixorize would be the same process with Anki, and that will specifically be with the Anking decks.
Yeah, I think that was great. I think that was really helpful. I'll say, so one of the questions was, do you recommend any of the available MCAT decks online? Any of the ones that Anika talked about in the earlier version of the PowerPoint, those are all excellent. You can't really go wrong with any of the ones that we shared. Should I use Anki for courses that I haven't actually taken yet? I would say no. I think you need to know the content before you do Anki. I'm not a big fan of pre-studying anyway, but if you do, like, you need to have some sort of knowledge of the content before you start reviewing. It's a way to review. It's not a way to learn.
I can take the next question. And with that last thing with what Noah said as well, you can use Anki in your courses if you're taking like courses. I used Anki throughout my pre-med classes, and those are really helpful. But like you said, I don't think it'd be useful to do if you're not actually taking the course. This question is, I've learned throughout my MCAT setting is that I need to use multiple tools to help me learn materials. I use Anki for certain things, but I also use Traverse as well. Sorry, this wasn't a question, but this is actually a really great point. If you don't know what Traverse is, here's like a quick little plug. It's Anki with mind maps. I'll just share my screen for 1 second, just if anybody's really interested in it. I actually helped with Traverse. I gave them a lot of feedback when I was in a pre-med. And it turned out to be a great tool, but this is kind of how Traverse works. You have, just like Sketchy, you have flashcards, but your flashcards exist inside of a mind map. So this is a mind map about hemostasis, and then here's my flashcard, and then you click on the card, and then you press good, just like you would with Anki. But you basically do that inside of mind maps, and there are Anking MCAT mind maps that have already been made, so that's also just helpful. But that was a great question.
I can take the next one. So this person asked, how many new MCAT cards should I see per day in a 2,900 card deck? So the answer is, unfortunately, it depends. So again, the deck has 2,900 cards, but it's up to you to decide how many to unsuspend. So like Raleigh showed us earlier, the cards will be yellow when they first show up, when you find them. And so you have to go in and unsuspend the cards that are relevant to what you learned for that day. So for example, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you would watch the video and then unsuspend the cards that are related to that. And so the amount of cards you would see is based on how much content you've covered that day. And then also based on how many reviews you have pending. But it really does depend. Some days you might have more than others, but again, you shouldn't see all 2,900 in one day. It's really important that you spread it out and are sustainable about how much content you tackle.
Yeah, I would say, as I'm going into step prep, which for those of you who don't know, the Anking deck for step 1 is like 33,000 cards. Okay, like it's insane. It's actually insane. But I would say, like, don't 100 or maybe 200 new cards a day. I wouldn't push it more than that, because you can really if you unlock like 300 cards and you do all that in a day, you're gonna see all of them again tomorrow too, and it's gonna keep like building. So that's why it's important to build a study schedule. And in fact, Raleigh and I posted on how to build a study schedule. So that's one of our previous recordings that you can go and watch. And we didn't specifically talk about Anki, but if that's something that you know that you want to incorporate into your study schedule, use some of the words that Raleigh and I shared with you in that previous recording that's on the Teach As You Learn YouTube channel. Let's see. How do you incorporate practice questions into Anki? Should I write questions word for word or summarize? Well, I would say, I know in medical school, we take advantage of third-party question banks, usually like Amboss for medical school or UWorld. There's UWorld for the MCAT as well. I think writing questions is a good use of time, but if you do that for just like making your own deck, it's a bigger time investment than using a pre-made deck, so just keep that in mind. I think it's a great way to do practice questions, and the ones that you get incorrect, oftentimes the explanations are paragraphs long. Don't make a card for each of those paragraphs. Like, have key points from your wrong answer, what are the key details that you missed in getting that question wrong, and make a card based on that if you're going to do it that way.
Yeah, I just want to say that Noah's advice right there is awesome, and not like word for word for the question, the practice question, because if you just copy the practice question word for word, then you're going to memorize those words and you're going to know the answer. You're going to be like, oh, of course this is B. But going with what Noah said, I think is the best way to go. Okay, I can take the next one. For closed cards, do you read the entire card or try to remember the closed items? That's a great question. So for someone who doesn't know what a closed card is, that means that basically in a sentence, if your card's a sentence, you have one word in the sentence occluded or not shown, and it's a very common card. I try to read the entire card typically, and I think that's helpful because as cards get a little bit more difficult, if you just immediately look at what's hidden, then you might miss details. So that's kind of one reason. But the second reason is I think it trains your mind on test day to not just look for the answer, but to actually read the question and the stem carefully.
Yeah, I think there's some, let me see if I can find some questions that Madison sent us, and maybe we can answer a couple of those before we call it. Okay, these really aren't Anki specific, but I think they're kind of good to go over them, and we can all share our perspectives on them. But one of the questions is, how many hours is the MCAT and what should you expect? The MCAT is a long exam. It's 8 hours. It's basically a full working day. You do have some breaks in between. What should you expect? You should expect to be in an unfamiliar room with unfamiliar people, and a long time, be used to fatigue. One of the things that was underrated for me was that it's actually, some testing centers can be kind of cold, so I would actually bring a sweater or a sweatshirt or something like that. So that's kind of what you can expect. You can expect a long day. You can expect to be tired, and you're in an unfamiliar environment. So that's why it's just important to be incredibly well practiced, because you're not going to experience anything like it until you get there.
Yeah, everything Noah said is spot on. Small things that I would maybe add is also, like, you have breaks, please take advantage of them. It's 8 hours long. I feel like when I first started taking practice tests, I'd be like, oh, I'm feeling good. Like in the first break, I'll just like go on to the next section. And in reality, it's an 8-hour long test. And if you don't take the breaks that you get, you're going to feel pretty fatigued and not really with it by the time you get to the end of the test and the later sections. So I would really recommend, like, when you take practice exams, like, just take them as if they're the real thing. Like, do your best to like minimize distractions. Like, because it is very much a unique experience for a lot of people. So the more you can get yourself acclimated to that, the better you'll feel on test day, and you won't have as many of those jitters that you usually do.
Let me see. Another sort of like general question, and Raleigh and I actually did an entire video on this as one of our things, but Anika's brand new, so she can share her perspective because she wasn't here to share her perspective before. But what is the strategy to succeed on the MCAT, and what was the schedule that they used to get a high score? I'll just go briefly over what I talked about last time, and then I'll let Anika speak. So the strategy that I used, I completed most of my core curriculum for the MCAT. Like, don't do the MCAT without having major foundational gaps in knowledge. You need biochemistry, you need organic chemistry, you need at least one semester of physics. Maybe you can get away with psych soc. That's why I always tell people, like, if you're gonna like leave something off as the courses and still take the MCAT, maybe physics too, and even that's pushing it. And then like sociology, definitely though, you can self-study sociology. But I took about 4 months. I was also taking courses, so I was fairly busy, but I took 4 months for MCAT prep. I always tell people about half for content review and half more geared towards practice questions and application of your knowledge. Don't underestimate content review. If you do practice questions and you don't know your content, it's going to be a very frustrating experience, but I'll let the others share their experience.
I can share kind of what I did. So I took the MCAT, like Noah said, after I'd finished most of my core courses. The only one that I hadn't taken yet was my second bit of physics, but I'd taken it in the past, so I was fairly certain that I'd feel okay about that part. I studied for about 3.5 months during the school year, but I very much pared down my classes so I would have time. I was basically part-time while I was studying for the MCAT. I really like sticking to free resources. Taking the MCAT can be expensive, so maximize what you've got. So I did the Kaplan books I did invest in. I think they're great for content review because they're very comprehensive. And I also liked reading them. It was like every day I would just like set up my schedule and be like, this is what I'm reading today. This is what I'm going to go over. So I found those to be really helpful when you have time. Also Khan Academy videos I used to supplement, especially for psych soc. For those of you who are on Reddit, there's a couple of like summary pages for psych soc that are based on the Khan Academy videos that are very famous. So there's one that's I think about 300 pages and one that's like under 100, and you can use either one of those. They're just really great for like a quick overview of things. So that's what I use mostly. And then I also had, I think one third-party resource was Blueprint, which is just for practice exams and questions. I think you guys can also speak to that if you've used it before, but that was mostly just because I didn't have enough practice tests if you just rely on the double AMC stuff. So I did a bunch of those first. And then once you get kind of in the later stages of when you're getting closer to your test day, I transitioned over to mostly doing the material provided by the double AMC. And I think that's pretty standard for most people to save that stuff for the end, just because you want to feel like you're doing the real thing as soon as you get close to your test date. Oh, and I also used Anki specifically for psych soc because a lot of memorization. That was my little supplementation.
You guys have already shared so many great things. Everything that they've said is great. Just to add some things, I took 5 months to study for it. I also used Anki in it. If there's anything you've seen and you haven't heard about studying for the MCAT yet, I think you kind of can tell by the way that we're all talking that this isn't a test that you study the week before to take the test. This is a test that you need to make a game plan, a study schedule, and then stick to it. We made a great video about that, and I think it's posted in one of the webinars you can find on YouTube. But yeah, everything that they've said. So studying, making sure you know content, use the free resources. I got like a tutoring class resource, and I wish I didn't, because it wasn't worth the money at all. I ended up I didn't use it anymore. So anyways, you can really learn the content by yourself. And then I think the only thing I'd add is just doing practice tests. I think I took about like 7 or 8 practice tests. I took 4 AMC tests, and you kind of save those at the end, and then other just standard practice tests. And those can be great benchmarks as you study, and those can be very helpful.
Yeah, I'll just add on. I think practice tests, especially near the end, are where you really cinch. For the high scores, anyway, that's something that they all have in common, is doing those practice tests near the end. For me, and I know everybody might not have as the luxury of being able to set a schedule, especially if you're not traditional, you have kids or you have a job. But for me, I had one day a week. For me, it was Sunday. I'm like, this is my day where I take 8 hours and I sit down and do a practice test, just like the real deal. And it sucks that you have to take that one day out of your week to do that, but you won't regret it. It's something that experience of pushing through that fatigue is going to be really helpful, because a lot of people, unfortunately, are really good test takers and know the content really well, and they just get dunked on because they've only done 20 questions at a time and not 200.
Yeah, I'll just echo again, just to add on again. If there's anything, take the practice tests like the real deal. Like, I know, like Noah said, not everyone has the luxury of doing it, but even if you can't take them every week per se, like if you spread them out and just make sure maybe every 2 weeks you can give yourself that amount of time or whatever it is for you, like, just, I feel like that's really important to like understand that's really key to like doing well and feeling really confident when you're going into test day, and how you feel can really make a big difference for you as well, like on your testing day.
Yeah, well, I just want to thank everybody for sticking with us and making this a great event. We enjoyed putting this together. It's kind of cathartic for me to talk to other medical students about our experiences and get to meet people from different places. So that's always fun. We love working together as a team. In the new year, we're kind of going to restructure how we do MCAT events. We're going to do, I think, one every quarter about so hopefully we get a large turnout. We can put out some higher quality and higher yield materials for you guys. So you have that to look forward to. So sometime between January and March, we'll have a new meeting for you all. I'll be in clerkships, but so maybe if you want to talk to me about that, you certainly can, and how I'm suffering, but it'll be okay. So with that, if anybody has any lasting words, we'll end it there, and thank you guys so much for joining.